Welcome to S.O.S, Sisters Overcoming Stress. I am one of your co-hosts, Denora Nieves, and I am here with your other co-hosts,
Tia Robinson.
Yes, and we are on our third episode. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about spiritual bypassing. Now, Tia, I know you were really excited about this. So let's talk a little bit about what spiritual bypassing is, and then tell me how you came to pick this topic for this month.
Okay. I think you have a definition of spiritual bypassing that probably would be much better than my explanation.
Okay, so the academic definition of spiritual bypassing, which we got, in the early 80s from John Wellwood, is basically spiritual ideas and practices that are used to sidestep personal, emotional, unfinished business, to shore up a shaky sense of self, or to belittle the basic needs and feelings and developmental tasks that people have, right? So in short, what we're talking about is you're faking the enlightenment funk, right? You're out there trying to convince yourself to be this more enlightened person and judging what you feel and not giving yourself an opportunity to work through these things. You just want to go straight to the Zen without going through the work, right?
Straight to the Zen, and even straight to the acknowledgement, the validation, the followers, the views, the
yes.
The
good look.
Exactly. This spirituality, just in terms of a practice, but also the business of spirituality has grown so much over the past couple of years. And I think also with the onset of social media, people are constantly looking for what's new, what's different. What are you bringing to the table that's unique? This whole thought process of uniqueness has really kind of brought attention to a lot of different disciplines and practices, like meditation, which is something that, I'm deeply in. And it's given eyes to something that, a lot of people may not necessarily have exposure to. So with spirituality being trendy, I will say, you tend to see a lot of spiritual bypassing. And I don't know about you, I've been to different classes and workshops and things of that sort. And sometimes you get a lot of great information, and sometimes you get information where you're like, or, think about it from the standpoint of, I look at spiritual bypassing sometimes where I've been in situations, and I think when it comes to meditation or mental wellness or self-care, like a lot of our wanting to expose or share or bring light to these particular areas is really to facilitate our own healing in a certain way. And using something as a platform for your healing versus actually being a person who has studied a craft, studied a path, and has a story to tell gets very, very blurred. So that's why I was very passionate about speaking about it, because I hear a lot of stories. I've seen a lot of things. I've sat in, different scenarios, and there is a very thin line between using your path in spirituality as a way to facilitate your own healing and understanding, and then positioning yourself from an expert standpoint, right?
Yes.
Which is the reason why when I saw the article about spiritual bypassing, I was like, oh, we got to talk about
so we had to do this yesterday.
Yeah.
For me, it's big, right? Because so here's my thing about spiritual bypassing. First of all, I tend to be an intellectual person, right? I'm an Aquarius. I'm just an intellectual person. And the danger of that is what you're supposed to feel before you actually feel it. And so you can shame yourself into you can shame yourself and talk yourself out of feeling what you feel, because it's not the enlightened thing, it's not the thing you're supposed to be doing, it's not. So it took me a lot of time to learn how to work my feelings and really process my feelings and not have any judgment about what I'm feeling, you know? Mm-hmm. Anybody who's close to me knows that my father's ill right now, and that has been really difficult for me. And so people call me and be like, how you holding up? I'm like, some days I cry all day. Some days I'm awesome. Some days I cry all day and it's awesome. You know what I mean? Like, and you really just giving yourself the permission and the space to honor what you're feeling at all times, and not feeling like you should be feeling something different than whatever it is that you're feeling, and working through that feeling. And I agree with you. You know, when people say I'm an expert, I'm like, oh, that's cute. You know, thanks. I guess I'll take it. But really, I have my genius is that I can ask good questions. You know, I'm not really so much into answers. I could try. But really, the genius is about asking good questions and really doing the work constantly on yourself. You know, I think that people tend to think that spiritual work is a journey that has a destination. And so there's this idea that once you've arrived, once you've done it and you know how to do it, then that's what you do all the time. And it's not a linear process. You know, you go back and you go forth, and, you know, I do better now than I ever did before, but I'm light years away from levitating on the top of a mountain somewhere, you know?
Basically. And what did Erykah Badu say? The man that knows something knows that he knows nothing at all. Yeah. Like, when you really start to go down that path, you realize, like, okay, like, I really thought I knew some stuff, and I know jack diddly squat, right? And then I always talk to people about from the standpoint of, like, we have different themes and echoes that appear in our lives that really test our understanding and our knowing of what experiences that we think we've overcome, right? So you'll be like, why am I attracting the same man, you know, or like, why do I always have difficult bosses, or you know, whatever it is that might present itself. I think that is our way of, you know, you talk about your genius being in asking questions, but being able to apply some of that stuff is themes and echoes continue to pop up to be able to push us forward in those paths. So
I love that term, the echoes, because they really do come up. You know, I tell people all the time, I think of who I want to be, and then I go home to test it.
Oh, yeah. Test it on your family, test it on your significant other. You know, like, yes.
Left to my own devices in my room, I could be anybody.
And truth be told, you could be anybody on social media as well. But
then I come home, you know, and I have to have conversations with the people who program the buttons and, you know, and know how to push them. And they do a great job. And I really have to walk my talk. You know, and that's really what it's about. It's about walking the talk. I think people, you know, I do think you're right that people get caught up in this idea of being an expert. And I think that people get caught up in this idea of being enlightened. And they get caught up in this idea of the look of Zen, right? Of looking like you have it together. And there is a way to have it together. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that everybody has to be a mess at all times. But I do think that when you find yourself bypassing what you really feel for what you think you should feel or what you want other people to think you feel, you have a problem.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Like this morning I was like, oh, I gotta film this podcast, I should do my hair. No, yeah, I'm not doing my hair. All day, guys. I'm not doing my hair. I'm gonna throw this sloppy bun up and I'm calling it a day. Because, you know, we get so caught up in looking better than we feel. That this is how I feel today, people. This bun right here, if anybody is looking at the video, this bun right here is a microcosm of my emotional chaos. Just being weaved together and barely held by some poor elastic.
No, it's your antenna, right? So you're getting all of your source knowledge and information coming into the bun, right? And it's disseminating.
It's the crown.
Crown chakra. Look,
everybody wants the gold crown. Nobody wants the thorn crown. No. You know, different days, you got different crowns. Like, that's just what it is.
So, personally, for you, how is it that you learned as a person to listen to your inner self in terms of honoring your feelings and your emotions, and doing that in a way where you are not spiritually bypassing?
Yeah, you know, I talk about this in the book a lot, and this is a big lesson for me.
The book? Drop the book's information.
Drop the book.
Yes.
Horrible and funny. Love you. 12 ways to be who you are. To love who you are. 12 ways to be who you love and love who you are. Pick it up on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. I talk a lot about humility. Humility was one of the key lessons for me. Why? Because, you know, first of all, we women of color in urban environments, and, you know, we just not taught to be humble. We're taught that is an impediment. You will not be heard, you will not be seen, and you will not be taken seriously if you are demure. Yes. And so really there's a piece of us that we're taught to look at humility as a fade to black. And you're taught that if you want something in the world, and that you need to be seen, you need to be heard, and you need to be taken seriously, and it means don't ever walk in a room and fade to black, right? And so there's this conflict that I think comes up because we're pushed to be assertive, and we don't understand how to balance that with an understanding that we aren't the epicenter of the world, right? So I remember I was taking this spirituality class at this Jewish organization that I was at, and the rabbi who was leading the group started to talk about humility as being the balance between you being everything and nothing, right? That you are everything in the world exists inside of you, and there's nothing more important than you. And yet, if you really look at the world and how large it is, and the galaxy and the universe, you're very insignificant, and how you can be completely important and insignificant all at the same time. And for me, that was huge, because I think it was the first time that I heard about and experienced this idea of humility as a balance between, like, I'm dope and I'm not so dope. You know what I mean? Like, I have it all together and I don't really have it together, you know, and that's okay, that there's a love in that there is a space for self-love in this idea that you are both everything and nothing at the same time. So for me, that was the basic thing. And I think once I was able to really ingest that and really incorporate that and really live that, then it became a lot easier for me to be honest. Because if I'm experiencing something, I don't feel bad about it, because I know if I'm experiencing it, there's a good likelihood that other people are too. So I can talk about it, I can be honest about it, I can be transparent, and I don't have any self-judgment about it, because I don't think it's a Denora problem. I think it's something that needs to be spoken, because if it's inside of me, it exists for everyone, right?
Yes.
So that really built my confidence about experiencing my emotions and not trying to hide them. At the same time, I know that my feelings are not the only thing in the universe, right? So I'm not posting everything I feel on freaking social media. You know, I have a sense of privacy, but not secrecy, right? If you call me and you ask me how I'm doing, you're going to get how I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I can be private, but I can also be honest. And I think that's an important balance for people.
I think that's so awesome, because I think also in this space, a lot of the times you hear, you know, if you've been doing this work and you've been doing it for some time, right? It's all about, you know, positive affirmations and to speak positivity, and you know, you create your universe and you create your world, and, you know, words have power and significance. But I also think that it's very important for us to be able to tap in all of our emotions. They're all human emotions. We're all having this human experience. And, you know, for me, I had to make the connection between allowing myself to be vulnerable and allowing myself to be honest, right? Because I went from a space of, I don't need to be vulnerable. Like, I got this, I got you, like, I am holding everybody's bag plus mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then starting to move
in the bag.
I got several bags. Garbage bags, trash bags, Gucci bags, bags, big bags, little bags, eye bags. Everybody bag, baby bags.
I love it. Yes, to the bags.
Yes. So holding everyone's bag and that kind of being how I identify myself, to moving into a space where I'm being told, like, the universe is awesome, it's wonderful, and blah, 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 which it is, but my spiritual path has been about balance and understanding the need to be vulnerable, yet the need to be able to articulate and express your human emotion and experience, and being able to allow those emotions and feelings to come up when they come up, express them, and then let them go, right? Not holding on to them, being able to release them. And so that was a unique experience for me, because I was going into two different environments that were polar opposite, being super, super hard and then being, super, super positive. And I'm like, that's not the human experience all the time, right? It's really about the balance in terms of being able to acknowledge those feelings and those thoughts as they come up, and allowing them to, fall to the side and releasing them and letting them go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big thing for all people. But, as we've talked about in the past, particularly for women of color who grow up the way that we grow up, because, and when I say that for listeners, what I mean is pushed to be overachievers in urban environments where there is little time and little encouragement for self-care. And it's all about, if you want to succeed, then embrace ambition, right? Yes. So that's what I mean when I say that. And I think a big piece of that is that you do have these, you have this dichotomous thinking that takes over, where it's like, either you're a mess and you fall apart, or you're strong and nothing bothers you. This idea that you could be strong and fall apart is so new, right? It's so new to us. Obviously, it's not new in thought or in theory, but it's new to our experience of allowing ourselves and giving ourselves permission to consider ourselves as strong and vulnerable at the same time, right? And negotiating that balance.
Yeah, because you think about the falling apart. Even when you said the falling apart, like, it was like a past memory. I just was like,
you feel the resistance come up.
Falling apart. Well, because but then that leads to the spiritual bypassing, right? Because a lot of our practice is about tearing things down and rebuilding them, right? And being able to understand things from an experiential standpoint, right? As well as being able to understand things from an intellectual standpoint. So I'm an experiential learner. And so when you said that, breaking and tearing of things down, that kind of, made my cells shake, because it's like, yes, that's exactly what it is. And that's exactly what happens when you start to move in paths to make sure that you are being the best you, right? So,
right. And you got to watch those habits, right? So falling apart can be a habit. So can holding it together. Right?
Yes.
So, hi, super women of color. Thanks for joining us. Right? That holding it together can be a habit. And let's be clear, if you're holding things together constantly, you ain't together. Yes. That's why you're doing so much holding.
Controlling. Holding and controlling.
Right? Exactly. So, falling apart can be a habit, and so can holding things together. And if you are stuck in the habit as opposed to alive in the experience, if you find yourself stuck in a habit as opposed to alive in an experience, I'm going to say that again. If you find yourself stuck in a habit as opposed to alive in an experience, you are cheating yourself. You're bypassing life in general, because those habits is a way of living by default. And if you're living by default, you're not creating. And if you're not creating, you're dying.
So what would you
enough?
No. You should hear me in my classes.
Creating, you're dying, right? Your
exactly. Will. It's like, yeah. People don't like hearing death, dying. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So I was going to ask, what do you think is a healthy marker for, the process of creating and recreating to get to learning, as opposed to it being spiritual bypassing and getting caught in the cycle of doing things over and over again? Like, when can a person say, I've dated the same guy 3 times. Like, I don't know why, I keep on attracting this person or whatever have you. And going
habit.
Exactly. Like, what's a good threshold to be able to say, okay, I'm going through this experience and I'm trying something new? Because I know people who have tried something new and they've gotten the same result, right?
Yeah. Well, that happens, right? Okay, here's the thing. So often we're creating from a place where we're unaware, right? And so you will just keep attracting the same thing. We don't know what's happening. When we start to gain some awareness, I got a friend right now who's in a relationship, and in the early stages of that relationship started to gain some awareness. Well, you didn't gain it quick enough not to attract the same kind of person, but you gained it quick enough to not be deep enough with that person. So now everything's a conflict, right? And so that'll happen as we're creating, and we're creating more consciously. We'll sometimes attract the same thing and have a different experience, or we'll attract something different and have the same experience, because we're negotiating the balance between what we attract and what we experience, right? And that's always, the attraction and the experience and the exchange. Those are always the markers, right? I think the question is, what are your questions? Everything for me goes back to questions, right? What are you asking yourself? What are you asking of yourself? What are you looking into for yourself, right? Those are the questions. Like, I journal a lot. I journal for real, meaning materially, on paper with my pen in my hand. I also do a lot of listing in my head, in the shower, in the bed, which is a form of scribing. Right? I'm just scribing on a more subconscious level, but it's important to get all of those feelings out and to ask a better, deeper question every time you go, right? So with all this stuff, I was asking myself, what am I angry about? Who am I mad at? And I had to really ask that question. Different people have a different process. It takes me 10 times of asking myself the question to get to a better answer. What am I angry about? I'm not angry about nothing. Next. What am I angry about? Well, I'm angry that, this situation is happening. Okay, why am I angry about that? Well, I'm angry about that because this is the impact it has on me. Why does that make me angry? Well, it makes me angry because all of a sudden I'm out of control. Why am I angry when I'm out of control? Well, I'm out of control and I'm angry because I don't trust whoever's in control. Well, who's in control? Well, okay. And now by the 10th question, I'm like, I'm angry at God. The way he's doing it, damn, and he ain't listening to me. And that's pissing me off, right?
And it's I'm angry because I really don't understand.
Right. Now we're having a real conversation. Now, but I had to be honest about the fact that I was angry to begin with. If I'm just I'm too enlightened to be angry, then I'm just going to stay angry and fake enlightened. Nobody needs fake enlightened running around. We got a lot of fake enlightened.
We do. And you just said that, and I'm just like, wow, we need to break this down into series, because what's the impact on people in the culture when it comes to fake enlightenment, right?
Shame.
What's the danger of that?
Shame.
When that's
Shame.
just heavy. It's just shame,
Yeah, because a massive amount, an inordinate amount of the things that ill us and ail us come as a result of our self-judgment. There are very few things, I can't even think of any, I just don't like to talk in absolutes. But there are very few things right? There are very few things that I can think of that don't in some way come back to self-judgment. And that, for me, that's a big area that I've worked a lot. And I still will find myself sometimes putting on a shirt and going, ooh, this used to look better. What? And it will again in my closet because I wear it. You know what I mean? And then you just have to work it. You work it, right? So a massive amount of the things that pain us come back to self-judgment. And I think what happens when we're not honest about our journey and we go through the spiritual bypassing is we make it uncomfortable for other people to be honest about their journey. And we create an atmosphere and a culture in which people feel ashamed for feeling what they feel. And then it becomes harder for them to work their initial feeling because now they're working the shame. Yeah. Which is being built as a layer on top of the initial pain.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, and a shame for not feeling what they think everyone else is feeling. Right? Like that's equally as I would say confusing and damaging. And I was just gonna say intimidating. When you're like, everybody around me is kind of getting this, and I'm just kind of like.
It's like my first yoga class all over. I'm like, why can't I get this downward dog crap? Everybody else got it.
Like my neck and my back, this don't feel good. I can't do full lotus. I'm a meditation instructor and I've never done full lotus. I am not a flexible person. Like I got that the first 3 toes kind of up on that leg, but man, my body is like, and I just had to give it up. I was like, are you teaching? I was going to say, are you teaching from the standpoint of helping and being of service, or do you want to look like something, right? Do you want to look like you know what you're doing, right?
That ego, man. That ego is everywhere. Everywhere. Because, we programmed the ego early on to protect us. And it will detect a threat, imaginary or real, anywhere. It's like my parents have a Morkie. My sister and my parents have a Morkie. He's half Maltese and half Yorkie, and he thinks he's a pit bull. And he will stand on the sofa and bark at every dog that goes by, and they're not checking for him. That's my ego. My ego is on the sofa somewhere barking at some. Barking. And whatever the thing is ain't checking for me, but he don't know, and he's just barking, And that ego will do that. It will drive you to create an image of yourself that you think you need to be safe from the criticisms of others. When nobody was checking for you.
The only person that's doing the criticism is you.
Exactly. Right? And so the question is, can you be honest about what you're feeling? Now, don't be a perpetual victim. Nobody needs that either, right? You don't need to be, always in a state of I feel bad or, whatever, because that's not honest either, right? But that all human beings have, highs and lows, that's the truth. And that all human beings are figuring it out, that's the truth. And that even the most enlightened of us have days where they're just like, I'm gonna eat this ice cream though. That's the truth, and I think that there has to be a space, particularly in communities of spiritual evolution, for people to be living their truth and not living what they believe enlightenment should look like.
Yeah.
Right?
You're right. I mean, I'm sitting up here like downloading and I'm like, oh my gosh, like we've got to talk about this. We got to talk about this. Blah, 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 blah. So I feel like we touched on so many other things that we can definitely go down the path of exploring a little bit more. One of the things that you mentioned that popped up in my head immediately was about self-criticism, right? And how no one's really checking for you. And I just thought like, wow, to be able to talk about self-criticism from the standpoint of preventing you from, being your best self, or even just establishing or reaching a goal, I can't do this because blah, 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 or such and such is doing this,
or I'm not good enough
doing it. Exactly.
Oh my God, the I'm not good enough beast.
Yeah, you have these internal conversations, and then just realizing how those conversations that nobody else is checking for, nobody else hears, but that you make up in your own brain and psyche are really the things that are prohibiting you from moving forward and truly living your best life. So
yes. So on that note, tune back in on the 19th of every month to S.O.S, Sisters Overcoming Stress, with your co-host Tia Robinson and me, Denora Nieves, and we were going to be hitting all of those topics. We're going to be hitting self-criticism. We're going to be hitting self-judgment. We're going to be hitting all kinds of things that are getting in the way of you being your best self, because we really, really want a movement of sisters coming together to overcome stress. So Stay tuned and tune in.